Greetings, pilgrims, and welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage, and today I have something pretty fancy for you. We are working on some dice for our game project. So if I hit play here, let's take a look at what we have first. So what we're going to be creating today are these dodecahedron, which means they are 12-sided die, and there are multiple, so die, or dice. So each die has these different symbols on them, and right now these are physics actors, so I can push them around the world, and they roll, and they will land on something. So ultimately what we want is the ability to pick these dice up, run around the world, throw them at our enemies, and they'll be treated as like a projectile, so you can throw it at them and do damage to them. However, that's also how you throw them to throw the dice, to actually roll the dice. Later, in a future episode, we're going to work over here on these completed die, where the roll will actually determine which of these spikes is facing forward and upwards, and that will tell us what we've rolled. So I hit the R key here, you'll see it tells me that I've rolled 2 of the effects, which is true. Those 2, there's effect 1, effect 2. So for today, we're going to work on modeling this, unwrapping it, getting it painted and imported into Unreal, and then creating the material inside of Unreal so that they look awesome like this. Okay? So to begin with, let me jump out of presentation mode here. Let's jump over to Maya and start modeling these. So I'm going to bring up Maya over here. And here we are inside of Maya. Now this cube here represents one tile in our game world. So by one tile, I mean 180 by 22.5 by 180. So if I look at the settings here, that's what I have here. So that represents one tile in our world. Now we want our dice to be roughly, you can draw a circle here comfortably in the middle, about that size. So what that works out to is about 1/4 of a tile, really, but spherical, and then in the center here. So to create our dodecahedron dice, nice alliteration there, we're going to go up here to Create, Polygon Primitives, and then all the way down here to Platonic Solids, and click on the Options box. This will bring up our options. And I have changed the radius to 45. I have not edited the side length at all. I left the axis alone. I did do the drop down here for platonic type and chose dodecahedron. That is a 12-sided figure. Now, these options here are lovely because here it says create UVs. Sure, you can go ahead and do that for me. Normalize, yes please. Collectively, I'm not sure what that means, but I'll leave it alone. And then preserve aspect ratio. That means that each of our faces on the die are going to be unwrapped and smoothed out on the unwrapped sheet so that they are equal in size. And that's perfect, that's what we want. So let's go ahead and click create. And here is our die. Now if I select it, let's move it up a little bit. So this is how it will be imported into the world. Now what I'm going to do is move this, because we know that that size is correct. And let's set this guy to the 0, 0, 0. Because that's how we're going to import it into the world, and that will be its center pivot, and that's going to be important for how it rolls. Now, we need to unwrap it, but look at that, we're done. So it already did it for us based upon those options from our previous dialogue. So if I just click here to view our UVs, there they are. Nice and easy. Now for my UVs, what I did was I went here to went face, selected these, and I'm going to go up here to polygons, create UV shell. And I move this over here a little bit, select this UV shell, move them down here a little bit. Then I selected all of them together. This is important. Scale, and I'm going to scale them up just a little bit. And now if I start to move them again, I'll move that guy there, select this guy, move him in here. So now they're both on the UV sheet. And I did this back and forth until I got about a consistent border around everything, a little bit of a gap here. Now, the important thing is that we selected them both together and scaled together. That means they've maintained the same aspect ratio. And this is vital because now they are the same aspect ratio. That means this face is the same size as this face, it's the same size as this one, they're all the same. That way, when we go to paint, nothing looks wonky. We don't have the skull and one of them looks perfect and then right next to it or over here next to it, based upon how this unfolds, you have the treasure chest icon and it looks blurry. We don't want that. Okay, so this is all done. Now, one thing you can do to help yourself is if you select everything, then it's under, where is it at? Yeah, Polygons, UV Snapshot. And this is how you can export an image to bring into your favorite picture editing software. I use Photoshop, and then you can use that as a UV guide to then place your icons. We're not going to go over the Photoshop part in this tutorial because that's very, I say, personal just for your project. You know, what your icons look like might be different than mine, and it's very kind of flexible in there. So, but know that this is a way to export an image to use in that process to make that process easier on yourself. Okay, so we're all done with this. Let's close that up. So this guy's ready for import, and I've already imported him into the world, and I'll go over the settings there. So let's go ahead and close Maya. We're done with that. Save a little bit of memory here on the computer. Okay, so when he gets imported into the world, this is what he looks like. Let's see, he is here, test die number 1. So let's bring this in. So I have already assigned the material, but just pretend he's gray for the moment. So we bring him into the world, and once he's imported, and you import, by the way, right click, import to game, and then just browse for your file. So I would browse for test die low poly. Oh, here's one that I did earlier, the tutorial one. So we'll do that, import, open, and we're going to leave all of this alone. Just say import. There he is. Okay, so we'll do this completely from scratch for you. There we go, test die. I'm going to double click it. Don't know why it does that. Here we go. So he's imported into the world. Yay, hello. So now we're going to make a couple changes over here. I'm going to go down here to the collision. I'm going to say simple and complex. Okay, that's going to be important for the fact that we want it to roll, and we want it to use itself. If I look at the collision now, see here, it's going to use itself pretty much. I mean, it moves it a little bit, but here this gives us a much better, closer approximation than just a cube. Now you could also change this to use complex collision as simple, and now it's using the actual geometry. And I need to test that because I could not get that to work with physics, but we'll find out. So we'll go ahead and click save, and we're all done there. Now with this guy selected, let's bring him into the world. Here he is. Okay, and we'll bring him up. Now you'll notice that the pivot is on the bottom here, which means I did not export this one correctly. But these guys, the pivot is in the center. That's why we did that 0, 0, 0. So that's very important, okay? But for this guy, let's take a look. We go down here into our physics. We want to simulate physics. And then under collision, we make sure it says physics actor. So now when I save and hit play, it should all roll around properly, and he's not. And I think that's because of that option. Yep, see, it's giving me a warning. So when we go back into our tutorial die here, we cannot choose this option, this use complex collision as simple. That's why we use simple and complex. So it's not a perfect approximation, but it's very, very close. So now we hit play. Now you'll notice he falls to the floor and he can roll around. So what he's rolling around on is not exactly the exact shape of the model, but it's so close that we can use it for our purposes. Okay? So now we need to paint this guy, and we need to get him into our world where he's looking all nice and fancy like these guys do. So the one thing I did do with Maya that I forgot to mention is that I did export a slightly higher res version. All I did was chamfer the edges of everything, chamfered it by I think 6 to make the edges nice and smooth. So that way when we do the baking, it will bake with these nice smooth edges. Okay, so now that he's done, let's go over to Substance Painter, and we're going to paint him. All right, so here we are in Substance Painter. And as you can see, yeah, it's already done, but I just wanted to show you the end product, and then we'll talk about what each of these layers means. Now, you'll notice that the icons I have here, these are icons that I made, and this is what I said I skipped in Photoshop is because this is up to you for your project. So what you do is use that image that we exported earlier that is all of the UV shapes here, and then just in a Photoshop file, create your icons, figure out which sides of the die you want different things to go on. It makes a difference because here you notice I wanted this particular die to be more likely that you'll get a loot icon. So I made sure to put the loot icons next to each other. Okay? So once you have that image, all you need, it needs to be a black and white image. So it's just white where you want the pips to be and black everywhere else. So my first layer here is a paint layer, and what I've painted here is a height normal of -0.4. I've changed the roughness up a little bit. Base color doesn't really matter, we're not going to use that. And I created a mask. So when I go up here and click mask, I'm going to choose to create add a bitmap mask. And from that bitmap mask, it's going to ask me to choose one, and I'm going to choose my texture that we're going to import. Okay? So let's go to textures. And you notice I have nothing in here that looks like that yet because I added this to the session and not to the actual project. And then you can add it to your project, but I added it just to the session because I didn't need it more than once just to make sure that this was working. Now that it's working, I can go back and I can clean it up quite a bit. So I'm going to pull up the one that I made, and we'll use that as an example. Here we go. So from off screen here, I have a file folder. Okay, I'm just going to click and drag and drop them right here. So now this is saying, okay, well, what is this? Tell me more about what it is you're bringing in. So undefined, I'm going to say this is a texture. And then down here, I'm going to say, I only want this for the current session. That's what I did before. That's why it's not showing up here now, because this is a new session, a new time that I've opened Substance Painter, so it's not here. So I'm going to say current session only import. There he is. Now if I filter by textures, it's a little easier to see. There's my texture. So all it is, like I said, it's just white where I want the pips to be and black everywhere else. So now when I go to add this mask, when I right click and say add bitmap mask, I can search for it. So this is called dice icons, and there you go. It starts to show up, and you just click that, and now he'll show up here. There we go. So now what that means is when I paint over these, which I've already done, but when I paint over these, it's going to move everything down to -0.4 on the height. So it's going to push into the surface, but it's only going to do that where there's white on this image. So that means only the pips get pushed down. And as you can see, that's exactly what we have here. See, that skull is depressed inward. So excellent. So that takes care of that. And just for chagrins, let's take a look at, we'll do it in stages, okay? So this is what we end up with at that point. If you're following along, you'll have your image here and you'll just be impressing into the surface. Okay, that looks good, but this looks like a dull dye. Let's add some color to it, right? So we're gonna add a fill layer, and this fill layer, all it is gonna be is the color that you want. I changed these values here, the roughness, I made it a little bit rougher. I didn't want it completely shiny. You know, I want a little bit of roughness to it. And put the metallic down to 0 because it's not a metal object. But you'll notice that the color is going everywhere, even over the pips, so we'll handle that separately in a moment. Now, this layer here is just a little bit of speckling to it. These are made of different resins and plastics and different processes, so we want to make sure that we added in some speckling. And the way I did this was, this is just a fill layer, and I went to my procedurals, and the dirt here, I chose dirt 6. You just click and drag and drop it right here where it says base material, and boom, it'll change it into dirt 6. For UV scale, I click this button to edit and shows 8, so that it would make a little bit more fine of a pattern. And then I changed the mode for this layer to screen and brought it down to 31. And that's giving us what we see here. So it's a nice little speckle pattern. Looks good. Let's do one more. So now if I do this one, you'll see it got a little darker in some areas, but still have some highlights. This is the same kind of fill layer, but what I've done here is this is a dirt 6, a dirt 2, sorry. It was 6 for the first one, 2 for this one. And you'll notice dirt 2 here is a lot more spread out. And I've put this also to 8. This way the two different dirts are on two different patterns, so they kind of blend together. And I set this to multiply 31. That makes the whole die look like this. But now we still need the pips to be white, so one more fill layer up here. So what I'm filling here is a color. I'm actually filling the actual image itself. So what I've done is gone to textures, and this texture here, I've clicked and dragged him over here, so now it's putting white and black. But then I also, using the same image as the mask, which means it's putting white and black on top of this, but only where there's white, which means it only puts white. We don't get the black. And all of that combined gives us our nice little die texture. Okay, so this is all good. Now let's export it and bring it into Unreal. So we say File, Export Textures. This is going to come up, and what we're going to do is I'm going to tell it where I want it to put it. So this is the name of the project, Meshes, Dice. We're going to choose a Targa as a file format, and then Unreal Engine 4 packed for this config. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but that's going to pack all the textured information we need for this down into 3 images. And then I'm just going to say export, which I've already done. So let's jump over to Unreal and take a look at that. So I'm going to close this out, save a little bit of memory again. Okay, so here we are inside of Unreal, and you'll notice we have 3 textures. So I imported these, again, by doing right click, import the game, and then find it and click open, okay? So this first one is obviously our color information. This is obviously a normal map. What in the heck is this? Okay, so you'll notice even the name tells you. It says there, occlusion, roughness, metallic. So it's actually 3 textures all crammed into one. And what we're doing is we're taking one image, which normally has 4 channels, a red, blue, green, and an alpha, and we're putting a whole map, a texture map, into each of those channels. So if I double click this, we'll take a look, I'll show you what I mean. So if I turn off all of these, first of all, we see nothing. If I look at just the red channel, you notice that this is almost pure white. So this is the ambient occlusion, but it's layered into just the red channel. So now if I look at just the green channel, you'll notice that I have some edging around some things. You can see just some faint highlights. So this is the roughness. So you notice the color, that's a pretty good color for roughness for this object. That makes sense, and it's all contained in just the green channel. And then the blue is our metallic, which obviously it's black, it's not a metallic object. Okay, so if I turn all these back on, it looks pretty crazy, but it works. So now, let's look at how we create the material for that. So I've already done this a couple times, but I'm just going to bring it up and show you how it works. So to create a new material, we're just going to right click in this space and say material, and then you give it a name, and then double click it, and then you'll get this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these images in here. So let's turn these off for now, and we'll do it as if it was real. There we go. So I'm going to bring each of these 3 in here by selecting them here, holding Control as I click to select them, click and drag, and I can click and drag right into here. And you notice there, 1, 2, 3. Now I've already done that. That's what these 3 are. So this first one is that color. See, just our color information. So I'm going to take this top pin, which means every channel in this image all combined, put it into here. Okay, so it's red, blue, and green all together. Put that in there to get just our color information. And this is what we get. Okay, so that looks good, except it's very flat. And obviously, you know, this is just a sphere for our demonstration purposes, but it's very flat, so we definitely need our normal map. So that's this guy here. So if we click this guy here, sorry, normal map. So we'll do the same thing. We'll plug him in. Okay, let's give it just a second to catch up, and we'll take a look. Here we go. Okay, that's looking a lot better. See, we have those ridges, so it looks more like an actual die, like this thing could roll and give us some interesting effects. So that's good, but we need our other maps. So now this guy, if we look here, occlusion, roughness, metallic. So that's what's in each of these channels. So if I take this occlusion from the red, put it into the ambient occlusion, this is the roughness on the green, and the blue is our metallic. So I'll plug all those in, and then we'll give it a second to catch up. Right about there. Boom, look at that. So now it's put everything in place, and that is looking awesome. That looks like our dye material. That looks like what we wanted, and it's all set up. So that's using only 3 image files. We're actually getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different maps. So awesome. So we'll save that, and let that save, close, and there we go. So now if we were to assign that, let's see, if I just pop that on there, there you go. And that guy's not quite unwrapped the same as the other 2, so it looks a little funky, but the principle is the same. You just drag and drop it on there, and now when we have our model in the world, we've done all of our settings, we've set it as a physics actor, we've created our material, we created our textures, we imported them, created the material, assigned it to the die, and now if we hit play, look at this. We have dice we can push around. Who wants to play some D&D? There we go. So as I said, this is the first step in creating our dice, and they look great and they work, which is amazing. So now I have to figure out how, it being a physics actor, I also need to be able to pick it up, hold it in front of my character, and when I hit a button, say throw it. And then in the following weeks, we're going to be working over here with how do the dice figure out what they've rolled. So right now you've noticed that it looks like I've rolled double effects. So I hit R. It says, yeah, effect and effect. So it tells me that I've rolled double effects. So now if I roll them Let's see, roll them. What do we get? Looks like loot and sword. Give it a second. Loot and sword, yeah. So what I'm going to be doing is working out a system to tell us, because you can roll them individually, I want to know which one gets locked in first. When you roll it, it'll end. It'll lock in place. So right there, then there'll be boom, like a little particle effect, and it'll be solid. Then you won't be able to push it around, and that'll be locked in place. And now when I say, what have I rolled? I've rolled Q, which is a question mark, and a sword. So that'll be a random effect for offense. So that's kind of what we're going with there. And then we have an object in the scene that you can't see, but it's actually managing the dice at all times. So once they've both been rolled, then the effect is triggered, and then they become physics actors again that we can push around, pick up, and throw. So that's the idea, and so we'll be getting to these next week. I'll show you all the coding that it takes to make these work. It's not really that complex, but it is difficult to understand, so we're going to take our time with that. But today, I just wanted to show you how to make the dice, get them rolling around the world, and if nothing else, you have some fun toys to play with. You can push things around. This is great for if you had just a ball or some odd shape, and you wanted to make sure you push it to goal or something like that. Well, then there you go. You've got that mechanic down. So I hope you guys have enjoyed very much so. And as always, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.